My name is Marianne Holbert, and I am an architect, and I'm an assistant clinical professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. Some sort of bird, maybe an eagle. So I don't think the airplanes are just about, I love to journey the world. I to experience myself in new locations and have culture reflected back at me and sort of change my perception of myself in the world. That's part of it. But there's also the notion of we as human beings, we don't know the limits of our capacity, and the power of the collaborative work of man both has constructive and destructive processes, and I think flight is one that teaches us about those poles too. But I would like to celebrate the constructive processes as opposed to the destructive processes. I would probably choose the Dolomites. Incredible mountain ranges. I'd say there's some parallel to Boulder from the cycling, the landscape. It's more kind of German in culture. I'd either choose the Dolomites or I'd choose Tuscany, that is in outside of the center city. So not near Siena, but in proximity, because the pulse of life is slower, the pace of life is different. There's kind of an essential connection to the earth. It probably also has some similarities to California, where it has rolling hills of vineyards, it has farmhouses, it has sunflowers. It really is renewing in the sense that it's primitive, farmhouses, connection to the land. So that would honestly be, if I were choosing for renewal. So one of my favorite lines from a book, which I think is life advice, and I've actually shared it with a number of former ENVD students, so Rainer Maria Rilke, who's the author. He's a poet, but he has also written a very, very short book, and now I'm going to forget the title of the book. I think it's Letters from a Young Poet, or Letters to a Young Poet. It's essentially a dialogue between a poet who is very well known and a young writer who wants to seek or reap the wisdom of this older poet. So that's Rilke. And he's asking, it's this exchange of letters, but you only see the letters that Rilke has written. And so you don't see, let me think about this. The exchange has a series of inquiries about life, and they're not just about poetry. They're about relationships, they're about path, they're about discerning. And it's a very, very short book, and it's a compendium, but there's one line that I'll paraphrase. It says that you ask questions of life, and you can ask question after question, and you can seek to answer them essentially on the periphery, but you live yourself into the answers. And so Rilke is essentially, so for me this has been something that, the reason I share it, or the reason it's been pretty powerful for me, is that we can often ask questions not engaging in life. So should I be an architect? Or should I do a PhD? Or should I move to another country? Should I study abroad? All of these things where you can ask and you can seek wisdom or response from someone else who you think is like you. So you could ask your faculty, you could ask your peers, you could ask your mother and your father. And there's kind of two parts. One, the answers have to come from you and your life and the yearnings that you have. So it's not as easy as saying, should I go to Krakow? And your mom saying yes or no. So that's the first part, that the answers come sort of from within. And the second part is that you have to live yourself into the answers. So for example, I've had students who say, should I apply to graduate school? Should I go to graduate school? And Should I do a Peace Corps? And sometimes you have to open the doors before you can say sort of the yes or no. But so I think that life really is about living yourself into the answers, and that if you're not living, if you're sitting on the periphery, in your room, on social media, or doing something asking, you might not even be living yourself into the answer. Maybe that first conversation with your faculty is how you're living into the answer. The next one is that you apply. The third one is that you get an invitation. The fourth one is that you go and you set foot on the campus. So I think that when we live ourselves into the answer, it implies that there's not a stagnant questioning process. It is actually that I am making choices, doing things, involving myself in the activity of life, and then the answers start to come. There's a technology of the practice of architecture, and again, you could say that there are rendering softwares or three-dimensionally modeling, there are drafting softwares, we were just talking today about wind study modeling or energy modeling. There's many different technologies related to the actual taking a building from an idea into its own making. And there are things that are almost obligations for one to learn. So if it was important for me as an intern in office, that might be a different answer than something that might change the future of the profession. And I hate to say that there's one singular one. Like I couldn't say that you have to learn Revit, because I think that can be not true in certain countries. I think that could be not accurate. So what I would say is an agility with technologies might be a better way to think about the right or single most important technology, because sometimes if you develop a comprehension, almost like it's a language, where you have fluency in the ease of mobility between one type and another, you have more latitude and you're actually more resilient to learn, because you can also leave yourself in the past by becoming really good at one that was valuable at one point but not learning or progressing, because the technology today will not match the technology of the future.